Ten play. It has finally come upon us here. Great to see that the meeting's being live streamed. That's what I was hoping for. It looks like we're almost ready to roll on YouTube. I think we are good to go. All right. Hoosier Nation, the calendar has turned to December. And if you're a college basketball fan, you know that means the temperature, the pressure cooker starts getting turned up a little. The Big Ten ACC Challenge is behind us. Indiana dropped their contest to Syracuse, but not without a show and fireworks and craziness that made you remember exactly just how ridiculous college basketball can be. We're going to dive into the final endings of the Syracuse game. We're going to talk about the Indiana Hoosiers going into Big Ten play and so much more here on episode 228 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ, recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Thursday night, December 2nd, 2021, where I'm your host, Nathan Krishnan. Here with me tonight is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, it was a ridiculous game on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Double overtime. Indiana probably shouldn't have been in it after going down by 19 points at the start of the second half. And then when they got back into it, you're like, why couldn't they win? College basketball, Matt. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. It's unpredictable. What are your thoughts, your high-level thoughts on how that Syracuse game ended?
We lost that game. Syracuse did not win that game. We lost that game. And it's unfortunate that was the result. I know Nathan and I didn't want to do the podcast yesterday because Nathan was in a bad mood. I'm presuming because of the game. And I was in a bad mood because I got my COVID booster and I felt like death. I still do, but I feel much better now. But I would like to say that having given another 24 hours to think upon the game, I am way less mad about the result than I was about 24 hours ago. Mostly because when you look back on it, this will probably be like a quad 2, quad 3 loss. And I know Ken Palm.
I think it'll go quad 1 because it was a true road game.
Yeah, maybe,
I think it'll sneak into quad 1. Yeah.
Yeah, quad 1 or quad 2. Syracuse is a good team. They'll play in a very weak ACC and probably finish 4th or 5th in that conference. And
weak ACC, man.
Weak ACC. And honestly, their loss to Colgate was a bit of a fluke to begin the year. Other than that, they've had some pretty decent results other than getting absolutely lambasted by Auburn. So it's not going to look as bad. I'm not mad. Let's just put it this way. I'm not mad. I'm disappointed. I'm not mad.
And I don't think you should be mad, mostly because while Indiana made plenty of mistakes on Tuesday night, they showed you some things that gave you confidence going forward. And I think that's what Hoosier fans are holding on to. We're going to talk about a poll that we threw out over on Indiana HQ after the game on Tuesday night. I think Indiana fans see 11 of 27 from 3. And they say, oh, that was pretty nice. And then they see 55% field goal shooting. They say, oh, look, offense. They see 110 points on the board, which to me, sometimes I have to look back, but that feels like 2 games last year or the year before.
Yes. Actually, yes.
And Indiana never quit. And that's really encouraging. And I'm not saying that was a major problem the last few years. I don't think it was, but they showed it, and they showed it again this year. And it's good to see Indiana, even when they're down 19, locked in, committed, thinking, believing, convinced that they have a chance of coming back in the game. And I have to tip my cap to the coaching staff. They put the team in positions to come back and then eventually to win the game. They decided in the second half they had to shoot more threes. They decided in the second half they had to take more chances on defense.
Yep.
And although there were turnover problems, although there were Boeheim problems, there are things you can be confident of going forward. So Indiana dropped a double overtime contest to Syracuse, 112 to 110. Yeah, it was a Boeheim bonanza. Jimmy Boeheim at 26, Buddy Boeheim at 27. Now, Buddy was a preseason All-American. So to say that, oh, wow, shocker, Buddy Boeheim scored 27 points, nothing crazy there. Jimmy Boeheim, especially in the first half, being an integral part of the Syracuse offense was very frustrating. But, man, I know the big problem that all IU fans want to talk about, the turnovers. And here's the thing. I know Syracuse plays a zone defense, and I know Syracuse notoriously has had a lot of long, rangy, disruptive defensive players. That's not the case this year. Syracuse was forcing less than 12 turnovers per game. They didn't give up more than 9. They didn't force more than 19 in a single game all season. And I know it went into double overtime, but Indiana had 25 on Saturday. And I know Mike Woodson's kept the number at 12. Matt, let's face it. If they had 12 or less in this game, Indiana would have won.
Yeah, they would have won. I think when you look at the turnovers, you go, okay, how could we turn over the ball that much? And to be honest, 26 turnovers is a lot. Though 2 players accounted for half the turnovers, and that's in Rayce and Trayce. Rayce, for all the good that he did in that game, had 7 turnovers. Of course, he also had 8 assists, so we will forgive him for that. Now, Trayce, remember we touched on how good Trayce was as a passer in the previous games, especially in the most recent game against
there was Marshall, and then before that there's Louisiana, Jackson State.
Marshall, sorry, ESPN made it look like it was Eastern Michigan, and I was like, that's not right. That's not right. Right colors, wrong team. So against Marshall, we talked about how good Trayce was at kicking out the 3. None of that. He had a goose egg in the assist category with 6 turnovers. That's not going to cut it. I know Trayce is not at sole fault for losing this game by any means. Again, putting up 20 or 31 points on 11 of 16 shooting, coming back from an injury, being our go-to guy down the stretch. Turnovers were not his fault entirely. The game is not his fault entirely, but he's got to be better with the ball, and Rayce as well. I touched on him earlier. Everybody does. So look, I'll live with Miller Kopp with 2 turnovers. All right, I'll live with that. I'll live with Xavier Johnson with 3. Like that's not. He has 9 assists to 3 turnovers. That to me is fine. I'll live with that. 2 assists, 2 turnovers from Parker Stewart. That's fine. That's fine with me. As long as you have more assists than turnovers, I don't care. If you have 6 assists and 0 assists and 6 turnovers, then we're going to start having a problem. And Trayce didn't have a very good game with that. Rayce had 8 assists. I get that, but 7 turnovers, a lot. Rayce especially struggled in the zone when he was on the low block. If you got him in the high post, Rayce was great. Again, that's something akin to what Archie did last year. He got Rayce in the little high-low action with Rayce and Trayce. Yeah. Rayce looked a lot more comfortable when in the high post. That started to become a thing in the second half. And the first half, we tried to get it to him down low and he tried to kind of shovel pass it almost to a cutter. And every single time there was a Syracuse defender kind of tip it away, they would get the ball and bring it down the court for a Buddy Boeheim 3. So it's just unfortunate. They're going to learn from this game. I'm not worried about the turnovers. I know we've had a bunch of games with 20 turnovers. Was this our 3rd game with 20 turnovers, Nathan? Like, that's a lot. And it's starting to become alarming to me, but I'm not pressing the panic button yet on it because I think it's very fixable.
Yeah, it's not panic time as far as turnovers are concerned. But this is the first major test for Mike Woodson, isn't it?
Yeah.
The biggest problem a lot of IU fans had with Archie Miller, had with Tom Crean, was that, the coaches were able to identify the problems, but actually fixing them was a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
And so this is the first big test for Mike Woodson. This will be the standard right now. What we're looking at this Indiana offense doing, this will be the standard that we say, look, it has to get better from here. There are 351 teams in Division I. Indiana's turning it over 16.9 times per game, which is 333rd in college basketball.
Yeah.
Get better.
Yeah.
I may not be 12. And if it is 12, you're feeling really good about where this team is going as far as March is concerned. But I'll tell you this, Mike Woodson, if it's true that he's running during practice because his team's turning it over, he is going to be really, really upset at how things have turned. And hey, look, if the players are primarily running because of their mistakes, and when they give it over 25 times, again, we're talking about defenses that really don't extract those turnovers from you in the first place. If you're doing it against Syracuse and if you're doing it against Louisiana, you're going to have a really tough time against Purdue and Michigan State and Wisconsin. And, I don't know exactly what the numbers are as far as those teams forcing turnovers, but I can imagine that they're right up there.
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't say that without doing my research. But look, Matt, you did say that Trayce Jackson-Davis did have 31 and 16. And since our last podcast episode, Indiana did beat Marshall, an 11-point win that I think will carry some water as the season continues. I think Marshall is a team that could contend for the Conference USA title. TJD had the Assembly Hall record, 43 points in that game, followed it up with the 31 against Syracuse. I think when Trayce Jackson-Davis came back to Indiana, I said, how much better can he really get? I looked at now, I said 19 and 9. That's pretty good. Hey, maybe he develops a little bit of a jump shot. Maybe he uses that right hand a little bit more often.
Yeah.
That attracts NBA scouts. Indiana has a better year, gets to the NCAA tournament, done and dusted. He has elevated his game to a completely different level, not only on the court. We're talking about double digits every game, Assembly Hall scoring record 43, which will be etched in stone forever until the next person scores 44, and then 31 and 16 against Syracuse.
Yep.
Not only on the court, off the court as well. He is the clear heartbeat of this team. And so as you look at Trayce Jackson-Davis right now, best player in the Big Ten, and exactly how good is he when you look across the entire NCAA?
He's an All-American, right? And clearly to me, he's slowly becoming a front runner for National Player of the Year, especially if Indiana is going to start winning anything. He's almost has to play like that, right? Like you saw what we needed to win against Marshall. We needed him to get 43. Now, of course, it kind of came easy to him because they were just giving him dunks.
That was ridiculous.
But we still needed that because Marshall was scoring a ton on our defense. And look, our defense is going to give up points this year, I think, in bunches, especially to players that can just dribble around the defense. We saw Buddy Boeheim be able to kind of weave his way into the lane whenever he wanted to in overtime. We don't really have a guard that's not named Rob Finney that can really get out and take away people's dribbles. And then we don't have a forward that can do that either. Like Miller Kopp's not going to be out there. He's going to try his best to stay in front of the guy, but he doesn't have the lateral quickness. Parker Stewart doesn't have the lateral quickness. Race Thompson's too big. So we're going to struggle guarding the ball this year when asked, especially if they're a highly skilled player. We're going to need Trayce to pop off. And right now he's doing his best to show America why everybody was like, especially the IU fan base was like, oh, he's
there's
coming
more.
back.
There's more.
Yeah.
And it's been wonderful to see. Of course, I just saw earlier tonight, he's representing along with some of his teammates, the men's basketball team at the IU women's game, which is coming down the wire right now, but things are looking a little bit difficult for the 6th ranked Hoosiers as they're down 7 late against NC State. We'll see if they can turn their fortunes around
down
here.
10 now with a minute left. It's over.
Not great. Not a great sign. TJD, though, you're talking about a guy who's at 22 points per game, 9 rebounds, And by the way, 3.7 blocks per game, a significant spike based on what we've seen in his first 2 years. And then you're catching the attention of NBA scouts who are not only noticing the numbers, but they're noticing his leadership and they're noticing him dunking on people's faces. He had 10 dunks against Marshall, which I believe was the most anyone's had in something like 10 years in college basketball. Of course, the 43 was more than anyone had scored in the NCAA this year, at least up through that Saturday night contest. Let's look at big picture here, man. I mean, there have been a lot of great players that have come through Indiana in the history of the program.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and call myself an expert on the Indiana Hoosiers, at least before the turn of the century. Okay. Let's zoom in specifically on the post Bobby Knight era. Mike Davis, Tom Crean, Kelvin Sampson, Dan Dockich, Archie Miller, Mike Woodson. Is Trayce Jackson-Davis the best Hoosier you've seen in the post Knight era? Is anyone doing more than he's doing? I know it's tough as a big, but I'm looking at some of this production. He's already in the top 50 as far as scorers in Indiana. He's putting up these ridiculous numbers. There's still a full season left. Are we looking at a historic type of basketball player here as far as the Hoosiers are concerned?
I don't think it's a stretch to say he's a top 5 guy, potentially, if he continues this up for the rest of the year. It's hard for me to put him above somebody like Yogi Ferrell, right? Who I think is probably the best player post Knight to play at IU for an entire career, especially his senior year. It was fantastic. And Yogi was on some great teams early on his career at IU as well. So Victor Oladipo's up there as well. Though Victor didn't have the stats, but his presence on the team alone was incredible. Zeller was great when he was here. Eric Gordon, DJ White, criminally underrated, by the way. He was so good. Like, everybody talks about Eric Gordon on that team because Eric Gordon's Eric Gordon and flashy and fun to watch. But DJ White was kind of very similar to what a Jawan Morgan, by the way, another player up there, or Trayce is like. He was just a guy who went about his business, was very productive in his role as a big man. And, he just so happened to be on a team with Eric Gordon and some of his shots got taken away from him, but DJ White was that good. So, I mean, if you have any other names you can throw out there, I think that's the list, though. There's not that many players we can talk about post Knight that I go, wow, this really, this jumps off the paper to me. Like, how could you bring this up as an argument? There is an argument to be made there.
Yeah, there is. And I don't think we're leaving anyone out. I know AJ Guyton is popular among Hoosier fans. I know Bracy Wright is popular.
Jared Jeffries
is popular, but TJD already is at 16.7 per game and 8.7 rebounds per game in the first half plus, 7 games in his hockey basketball career. And I do not expect him in any way, shape, or form to return to Indiana next season. Things can change, but that's just the way I look at it right now. If Jackson-Davis continues this level of performance, you're talking 22-8 in this junior season. By the way, also throwing in 3+ blocks per game, even if he turns that down a notch to like 2 or 2.5. I think you'll be hard pressed to put him under anyone else other than Yogi. I think it very well could be when we fast forward to April 1st, or for the most optimistic Hoosier fans who think IU's going to make it to the Final Four, April 8th, 2022. Let's fast forward to April 8th, 2022. It could very well be that since Bob Knight left Indiana, it's Yogi Ferrell and Trayce Jackson-Davis.
Yeah.
We also have no idea if TJD is going to find himself hitting a buzzer beater in Big Ten play. We don't, a Keith Smart type bump to his resume, right? If he hits a shot that goes down in history, of course, if he has an epic, 32.18 rebound game in the NCAA tournament, that sort of adds to that lore. You're talking about someone who has made such a major impact at Indiana. And, when we look back at even Cody Zeller, right, some extremely highly touted recruit, played 2 years at IU, considered very highly. He was at 16-7 as far as points and rebounds are concerned, with 1.2 blocks per game. Trayce Jackson-Davis comparatively is clearly better across all those key categories for a big. Jackson-Davis is averaging more points per game, more rebounds per game, significantly more blocks per game, and we still don't know what sort of things he'll accomplish here in what looks like his most productive season. So if we're talking about a 20.9 rebound, 3 block per game guy the rest of the way, and you mix in 1 or 2 big moments, I could very well be convinced that post 2000, TJD is the best player to have walked through Assembly Hall as far as his career accomplishments, as far as his individual single game accomplishments. This has nothing to do with what players do in the NBA, which I think has subconsciously boosted somebody like Victor Oladipo's argument here, because we've seen him make so many big plays with the Pacers and with other teams in the NBA. That we kind of remember, Victor Oladipo. And Oladipo was great. And Oladipo was a major part of Indiana's renaissance with Tom Crean as the head coach. But my gosh, when I see Trayce Jackson-Davis play, I not only see the numbers on the court, but I see the leadership and I see the emotion. And of course, in-state guy never hurts there as far as somebody who's from Center Grove High School. So there's a discussion to be had. Hey, you have to tip your cap to Jackson-Davis that we're even putting him in this conversation. Indiana's had a lot of significant basketball players come through. And hey, to say he's one of the best to wear the Indiana uniform since the end of the Bob Knight era, pretty great to be talking about. So that's pretty much a wrap for what happened in the past week with IU basketball. Big Ten action coming up for the Hoosiers. We're going to get to that in just a minute. First, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports. And IU sports won the week in IU sports. Why is that? Well, the Indiana University released a statistic earlier on Thursday that the Hoosiers recorded a 92% graduation rate across the athletics department for the past 6 years. Every time they release a graduation success rate, a GSR, it takes the past 6 classes, puts them all together, pumps out a percentage. 92% set a new record. Last 3 years, they were at 91%. So Scott Dolson, in the early part of his tenure, he set a new standard. Of course, all the credit goes to the student athletes who are balancing not only sports and studies, but a pandemic that was thrown into the middle of their entire college experience. So great job. Okay. And yeah, of course, that's just to the most recent class, but still, there's an additional external, impact that you have to consider there.
Factor.
So congrats to the student athletes of Indiana University for making parents and family members and friends and strangers proud all across Hoosier Nation. If you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information and following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ, as well as at the Hoosier Sound. This part is important. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and to reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. So Matt, couple games took place over the course of the last week. We're going to talk about Big Ten play in just a minute, but like we did after some of the Hoosier Classic games, as you look back on Indiana's performances against Marshall and Syracuse, let's throw out an offensive, a defensive, and an intangible player of the week. Let's start on offense. A lot of Hoosiers did good things. Indiana scored 90 against Marshall. They scored 110 against Syracuse. Who stood out for you on the offensive side of the ball over the last couple of games?
Yeah, so is there even a question to this answer? I mean, you can't give it to anybody but Trayce. If I would like to give a shout out, a giant shout out, a gold star to my boy Parker Stewart.
Yeah.
Who has had a fantastic last 2 games. Again, the Indiana Syracuse game, he had 20 points on 6 of 12 from 3. We'll take that. Like that's fantastic. Of course, he fouled out of the game. We're not going to talk about that. Only had 1 rebound. We're not going to talk about that. But his shooting, what he brings to the team, shooting wise, he's been fantastic. He was also shot it extremely well against Marshall. I don't have the statistics off the top of my head to tell you what his statistics were.
Yeah.
But all I know is that he shot above 40% from Marshall as well. And so that's what we need him to do. He's actually statistically the best 3-point shooter in the Big Ten right now at 47.8% on the year, which is absurd.
So, I'm not sure how much that's going to go down.
I'm not sure either. He shoots the shots he gets in the offense are extremely makeable. Like they're wide open. Like especially in the Syracuse game, he was like, I didn't seem like it on the TV because the zone makes everything look weird. But he was literally like the guys were lunging at him, and they still had an entire body length to even get to his face. Like that is how wide open he was on a lot of the 3-pointers he was getting against Syracuse. Yeah. Makes you wonder why Tamar Bates was 0 of 4. But then again, freshman's first experience on the road, it happens. And I'm not expecting him to go 0-4 a whole lot this year.
And I'm not sure even how much Syracuse is an appropriate barometer, right? Even for a first road game, it's the Carrier Dome, which is weird. It's the 2-3 zone, which is weird. Yes. Everything is Tamar Bates is just fine. Parker Stewart was 2 of 5 from deep against Marshall, 6 of 12 from deep against Syracuse, and just the ball comes out of his hands different. It just does. And, it's a dead on. Looks like it's a sniper shot from downtown. Silky smooth. And you better believe starting with Big Ten play coming up, he's going to be a very integral piece to what Indiana does. Miller Kopp, baby. Miller Kopp. We weren't quite sure what Indiana was going to get out of the Northwestern transfer. There was a clear adjustment process. The high he had in the game was 12 through the first 6. Multiple games where he scored 5 or fewer. Then against Syracuse, you saw the kind of player that we all want. Hoosier fans want Miller Kopp to be. He looked like somebody that noticed a tough situation. He noticed adversity. And then he decided it was going to be time for him to rock and roll.
Yep.
Went out there, supported Trayce Jackson-Davis wonderfully, 28 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 9 of 16 from the field, 4 of 9 beyond the arc, 3 clutch free throws out of 3 attempts.
Yes.
At the end of that game, which I know Indiana ended up losing, but for him to make 3 out of 3 in that clutch situation, that instantly tells me Kopp is going to be the go-to free throw shooter for this team late in close games. He's the guy.
Yeah.
Close games, Indiana's, and there are going to be a lot of them in Big Ten play. You're up 2, you're up 3, you're up 4. You need to get the ball in a guy's hands to make 2 shots at the end. Kopp's the guy. There can't be any conversation about it. What a performance for him. It was a career high 28 that he scored against Syracuse. More than he scored in any of his time at Northwestern. So tip of the cap to Miller Kopp. I saw somebody who I want to specify this, delivered in adversity, right? You can score 40 points against Marshall, and it is a legendary performance that Trayce Jackson-Davis put in that game, which of course had some twists and turns to it as well. But when you see Jackson-Davis do that against Marshall in some tough circumstances, and you see Kopp do what he did in tough circumstances at Syracuse, that's something that can give Hoosier Nation a lot of confidence. Matt, who stood out for you on defense? Indiana's defense did take a step back this past week, but I'm sure there was somebody that caught your attention.
This is the much harder question. Again, I think it was Trayce who won it the last time.
Okay.
We talked about this.
Uh-huh. Because I think he blocked like 7 shots in the game. Well, if you do that, then
yeah, I have a hard time giving it to anybody else. If I was forced to give it to somebody other than Trayce, I would go with Xavier Johnson for his Marshall performance.
he was great. That's a good point, right? We can forget that. We can tend to forget that Marshall game because it was 5 days ago as of recording of this podcast. He was really good defensively against Marshall.
Yes. Not good against Syracuse by any means. He fouled out.
Foul trouble, yeah.
By the way, I would like to point out, if Xavier Johnson plays more than 26 minutes this game,
no question.
He plays 32, we win this game in regulation. He was just much better out there than anybody else we really had. It's just severely unfortunate.
And that's interesting, right? It's a good point you're making because Johnson's availability for Indiana is a big deal.
Yes.
And this is exactly where I think Mike Woodson and Xavier Johnson and maybe a couple of other Hoosiers, along with the assistants, need to get together and realize, look, aggressive defense is good, but if you're fouling and that's a consistent trend, it's one thing if it's just one game. If it's a consistent trend, there needs to be an adjustment made so availability can take priority over everything.
Yep.
And so Johnson getting a shout out there for his Marshall defensive performance is something I agree with. Because I agree with you as well that there aren't all that many major defensive performances to shout out, I did want to tip my cap to Christian Lander. So Lander played very few minutes against Syracuse, came in late in regulation, and then played the majority of the overtimes. Not that comfortable of a situation for Lander. But one thing I noticed when he was on the court in minutes that even with how strange they were as far as when they came during the game, I saw somebody who looked comfortable. Yep. And if you go back and you watch the end of regulation all the way through the end of the overtimes against Syracuse, I would suggest you do it to watch how Lander defended Syracuse's point guard. He was right up, pressing him high, almost 6 or 7 feet beyond the three-point arc. Really good lateral movement by Lander as well. He moved very easily, very smoothly side to side to his left, very smoothly side to side to his right. It's easy to just look at steals and blocks and pick out the guy who has the most. And Trayce Jackson-Davis had a really strong defensive week. Xavier Johnson had a really strong defensive game against Marshall. But on the Hoosier side, we dig deeper than just the numbers. And Christian Lander, moving the way he did, looking as stable as he did on both sides of the court, I think is something that deserves a shout out. So even with Rob Finney returning, I think Christian Lander has earned his way to more playing time. Not playing time based on recruiting rankings, not playing time because you're shorthanded because Rob Finney's out. I think Christian Lander has earned playing time strictly off of merit. Am I crazy, or is that something you see as well?
I think you're crazy. I do not agree with anything you just said. I in fact thought he was awful in overtime. I was talking to Ant Wright about this after the game. I was in Ant Wright's Discord talking to him about this. Shout out Ant, because he got a job at On3. He got hired by On3 to cover Michigan. So congratulations to our friend. But yeah, I was messaging him, and he was not impressed in the slightest. Neither was I with Christian Lander.
What problems did he have with Christian?
He said he looked lost. He was a wild.
I disagree with that, Matt.
Puppy.
I saw somebody who came in a tough part of the game, right, thrown into the fire, and I saw somebody who has now strung together a few good games in a row. I'm encouraged by that.
All I said was he's going to do something great, which his three-pointer, by the way, was fantastic that he hit. That was a really good, huge three-pointer from deep, like NBA range three. That was fantastic. Him fouling the last second drive by Boeheim, not great. He was a little bit out of control. And he was out of control for most of overtime, in my opinion. He looked like he was playing well because he wasn't fouling like every other Indiana point guard, or basically every other Indiana guard. But he also wasn't in control, in my opinion. I felt like the game kind of like was too fast for him.
That's funny. It's funny that we saw it completely differently.
Yeah.
I was really encouraged by what I saw from Lander in those minutes that he got in such a pressure cooker type of atmosphere. We're also talking about him, stringing together some good games with Finney's absence. We'll see how Mike Woodson and the coaching staff addresses that with Big Ten play starting up this week. Hopefully, Lander plays well against Nebraska. I think that's what all of Hoosier Nation wants.
Let's talk about. He plays 20 minutes at the end of the game and we're up by 40. That's what I want.
Hey, anything Indiana up 40 in a Big Ten game, that's rare air based on what's happened the last few years.
True.
Intangibles, always tough to pick up on, Matt. Is there an Indiana player that delivered from an intangible standpoint from what you saw the last couple of games?
I'm going to give this one to Xavier Johnson, who has every right to be tilted and absolutely PO'd about half the foul calls in the last game. Some of them were ridiculous. I thought they penalized him way more than any other player in the game, and 4 players in this game fouled out. I thought the softest calls were called on Xavier, a couple ticky-tack ones that ended up costing him in the end. So he has
inconsistent too.
He has every right to be mad, and he came out on Twitter and was basically like, unlucky on the next one. And like, that's good mental. Like that's what we need. You can't get triggered in the middle of a season and basically think the world's against you, because look, basketball can be extremely frustrating. Any sport can be extremely frustrating, especially when it's some arbitrary calls by terrible ACC refs. I'm just proud of him for having tough mental and moving on with what had to have been an extremely frustrating game.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Especially somebody who used to play at Pitt. So he's got a little bit more edge to him going up against Syracuse, a team that used to be an ACC rival of his. I know Trayce Thompson did a lot of tangible stuff well. I know he gave it away a few more times than he should have against Syracuse. But every time I crunch Indiana's lineup numbers, I see Trayce Thompson always finish near the top or at the top. He's somebody who had another really good game against Syracuse as far as the plus minus stuff is concerned. He's always somebody who does the proverbial little things to win. And then, of course, more and more recently, we've seen him do the big things to win. And I know Indiana fell short against Syracuse, but I still felt like Trayce Thompson, who played 45 minutes against Syracuse and finished with a team high +9, delivers a tip of the cap in a game that Indiana lost by 2 points. So that's how we see Indiana fare and how Indiana look over the course of the last week. But now Nebraska comes to town. Madden's Big Ten play. Doesn't matter how good or bad the teams are. It feels like all these games come down to the wire. The fun starts on Friday, but Indiana hits the court on Saturday at noon Eastern against the Nebraska Cornhuskers. The Hoosiers are favored to win against Nebraska by 11, according to Ken Palm. He thinks his system has the Hoosiers winning this game 77-66. Nebraska's coming off a 4 overtime loss on the road at NC State on Wednesday night. So they have a day less of rest than Indiana. Of course, Indiana is returning home, whereas it's a back-to-back road situation for the Cornhuskers. Nebraska is a top 100 team in Ken Palm. They're not bad, but they have dropped a couple games this year that they probably regret when looking at their NCAA tournament hopes in the long run. Nebraska is led by 2 main guards, 5-star freshman Trey McGowens, as well as Arizona State transfer Alonzo Verge. Matt, talk to me about the Nebraska Cornhuskers.
Yeah, you have 2 really tough shot-making around the basket guards and Bryce McGowan's and Alonzo Verge. Both of them like to take their guy off the dribble, slash the bucket, finish through contact. Bryce McGowan's being a 5-star freshman. He gets a majority of the shots. He plays 35 minutes a game. He's a bit of a stud. The team shoots 27% from three, and only two players on their team shoot above 35%. And that is CJ Wilcher, who we've seen before in Assembly Hall many a time. And then Kisei I think
it's
Tominanga. Yes. And Kobe Webster. Kobe Webster, Casey, Tominaga are the two that shoot above 35%. CJ Wilcher comes in at 33%. Other than that, everybody else shoots 25% or lower on their team. So 3 people are going to be shooting threes. Kobe Webster, by the way, has only played in 6 games. But 3 people are going to be shooting threes. The rest are going to be trying to get to the basket, get to the hole. This is going to test our defense significantly. And I'll talk about this in the key matchups portion, and which we will get to in a minute. But again, Ames Snow, basically Bryce McGowan and Alonzo Verge are the 2 that I would look out for.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, Tominaga was called into duty yesterday against NC State because a couple of Nebraska players got ejected due to an on-court incident against the Wolfpack. So we'll see exactly how the rotation shakes out here when Nebraska takes on the Hoosiers tomorrow. I said Nebraska dropped a couple games they shouldn't have. I include NC State in that. They had a couple of trips to the free throw line at the end of regulation in that game where they made both. They would have clinched the deal. They definitely did not expect to lose their home opener to Western Illinois this year. And even in other home games and non-conference play that they've won, it's looked rough. Yep. They did lose Trey McGowan's an experienced player to injury at the start of the season, but still wins where they struggled against Tennessee State, against Sam Houston State, against South Dakota, not the greatest endorsement for Fred Hoiberg. Indiana has had a lot of success in this matchup, going 16-7. The Hoosiers have won the last 4 against Nebraska, and you can expect them to be something like a double-digit favorite going into this game on Saturday at noon. By the way, Stephen Bardo, once again on the call, so Hoosier Nation can be proud of that and look forward to that at noon Eastern on Saturday.
Whoa.
Man, your face. This is why you guys got to watch the YouTube. Matt's face there. Wow. That was top 10 YouTube moment. Before we dive into the matchups and our prediction for this game, let's dive into a social media shout out. I wanted to call Peyton Hender shout out on Instagram. He posted his farewell to the IU football program. There is no official announcement on whether or not he entered the transfer portal or whether he's declaring for the pros. I'm not sure if a decision has been made there. Hendershot, regardless, though, was named 3rd team All Big Ten, fully deserving of all the credit. Even with IU's offense struggling as much as it was, he was the significant bright spot on the offense. As you sort of zoom out and look at everyone that took the field this year.
Not hard to be the bright spot on that offense.
No, it's not. But of course, when you see him get all Big Ten recognition, fully deserved, it's good to see that the coaches and the media recognize somebody who not only was good in previous seasons, but was once again really good this past year for IU football. We plan on looking back at the entire IU football season on our podcast either next Tuesday or the following Tuesday. So we're talking either December 7th or the 14th. Stay tuned. There's a lot of news coming down. We obviously have seen the reports that Indiana fired offensive coordinator Nick Sheridan. Once everything settles, as far as the dust is concerned, we'll zoom out and take a look at Indiana's 2-10 football season. We don't have to dive into this, Matt, but my God, the college football coaching carousel right now, absolutely bananas.
Yes. Crazy. Insane.
Ridiculous.
I mean, there's 2 coaches now being hired in the state of Indiana, one of which we didn't think would leave. You have Oklahoma apparently has now what spies, people turncoats against the program are recruiting for USC on Oklahoma recruiting visits using Oklahoma money.
Who are the two Indiana coaches you're talking about?
Well, I mean, offensive coordinator.
Okay.
The most important.
I was like
the
Brian
most
Kelly,
important positional coach in Indiana. Of course, I was talking about Ball State. And then Brian
good
Kelly.
Season, by the way. Ball State, good season this past year.
Yeah, have a good season.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, I was just making sure I didn't miss something because
honestly, that's not
like Virginia.
crazy.
Well, Virginia's coach Bronco Mendenhall abruptly announced his resignation earlier today.
That doesn't make much sense to me.
That's all I'm saying. So when you said that, then nothing can be taken for granted in this college football coaching carousel. But anyway, shout out to Peyton Hendershot on Instagram. Make sure you go follow him if you don't already. There will be an NFL career in the future for him. I'm looking forward to seeing his combine and pro day numbers. I think if he records well there, he could very well be selected in the 2022 NFL draft if he so chooses to take that route. So make sure you follow Peyton Hendershot on Instagram. On our social media, make sure you give us a follow over at Indiana HQ, or the Hoosier Sound on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. We upload videos. We upload images from the site. And Jevin is usually at Assembly Hall. He was at the Carrier Dome in Syracuse on Tuesday night. We almost always have boots on the ground as far as the IU men's basketball season is concerned. And you better believe we're going to have that once we head into the Big Ten or the NCAA tournament. So make sure you give us a follow. Again, we're at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Matt, on Instagram, we're not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
Exactly. That's where you can follow us there. We are churning out more and more stuff. We want to say hello to all of our recent Instagram followers. Our main photographer and videographer, Colin Ebel, continuously throws out some great stuff over on Indiana.HQ on Instagram. So make sure you follow us there. If you already follow us on Twitter and Facebook, give us a follow over on Instagram as well. Let's dive into the matchups, the predictions, things to watch for as far as Nebraska is concerned, Matt. To me, rebounding is where Indiana is going to win this game. Nebraska is going to try to beat you on pace. They're going to try to beat you on three-point shooting. As far as I'm concerned, Indiana went plus 15 in rebounding against Syracuse. Indiana plus 15 might be too low. Trayce Jackson-Davis and Rayce Thompson and Michael Durr, when he comes in, and the guards as well and the wings on this Indiana team, can basically gobble up rebounds at will against the front line and against the back line against this Nebraska team. So rebounding is the stat that I'm looking for when IU takes on Nebraska. What has your attention as the Hoosiers try to start Big Ten play 1-0?
I think we win this game if Bryce McGowns and Alonzo Verge stay around their points per game mark.
Yeah.
Bryce McGowns at 18.5, sorry. If he's in and around 18, 19 points in this game, that's good. If Alonzo Verge is at 15 points this game, that is good. Again, the problem is those two guys can create off the dribble. What have we struggled with so far guarding on defense is guarding guys off the dribble.
Yeah. If
we can contain them and keep them to their average, we should be able to dominate Derek Walker. Our forwards and Rayce Thompson and Trayce should be able to eat. I'm not worried about the rebounding at all. That's not a concern to me. The concern to me is, do their guards get comfortable in Assembly Hall? If the answer is no, which this team has shown it's able to do that. Again, like, let's not forget that Jackson State game was not very far off in the distance past. Like, you can force people to not play well in Assembly Hall. It is possible. It is an outcome that this team has shown is possible. So I'd like for IU to make things uncomfortable for a freshman who this is his second true road game. It's going to be tough. I don't know how tough NC State's environment is, but I'm going
It
to.
wasn't good. I watched a good chunk of that game
Yeah.
last night because it went 4 overtimes.
Yes.
But honestly, Raleigh, it's a good college basketball fan base. Yesterday was a bit lacking. So Assembly Hall is going to be a much different story.
They were still all hungover from the football game a couple nights ago. So
Big dub.
big dub for
Big
NC State,
NC
for the
State.
Wolfpack.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah. So if we can make them uncomfortable and keep them in and around their averages, maybe even a little bit below their average for the season, I think we have a very good chance of winning it.
Yeah, and also that football game was like 5 days before. So if you got
It's a long hangover. They were happy
because they played back on the Friday night after
They
Thanksgiving.
did.
Anyway, it's a 5-day hangover.
It feels like forever ago.
Yeah, and, Bryce McGowan is going to grab all the headlines, understandably, but Alonzo Verge is someone you have to watch out for. Somebody, Pac-12 program. Arizona State has had good years recently. They put up like 30 points against Washington State in a Pac-12 game in the past week, like for the entire game in a college basketball Pac-12 game. So clearly Arizona State is feeling Alonzo Verge's absence. Verge has put up double figures in the points category in every game but for one this year. He contributes as far as rebounds are concerned. He's had as many as 13 rebounds in a game, and he's found a way to get 10 assists in a game as well. He has double-digit rebounds in fact, 2 games this season. So Verge, McGowan's, you better believe Indiana's going to throw everything they can at both of those guards. As far as Xavier Johnson, Rob Finnessy's health is going to be of the utmost importance. It was good to see Phinnessy get minutes against Syracuse and look healthy and look like somebody who was comfortable as far as his playing time was concerned. So Phinnessy, Johnson, Miller, Kopp, Tamar Bates, they're all going to play a major role out on the perimeter to control Bryce McGowan's as well as Alonzo Verge. So, Matt, Indiana is projected to win in KenPom 77-66. You're talking about a couple teams, by the way, that play fast. Nebraska has got a pace of 60th in college basketball out of 355. And don't look now, Indiana has a pace ranking of 109th out of 355 in college basketball. So the Hoosiers, even against Syracuse, a team that notoriously plays slowly, the Hoosiers are getting up and down the court a little bit more often this year than they did in previous seasons.
Sometimes a little bit more recklessly than others, but
Nebraska is 97th in the KenPom ratings. Indiana is 31st. Matt, who wins this game and by how much?
I was wrong on the Syracuse game. So I can't be wrong about this game. IU wins comfortably. They come out mad. Xavier Johnson is upset by how last game transpired. He takes that anger and he throws it all at Alonzo Verge. And Xavier Johnson has the best game as a Hoosier. And IU wins 78-62.
I have IU winning comfortably as well. I think IU is going to cover too. I'm assuming the spread, even though it hasn't been released as of the recording of this podcast, I'm assuming the spread will be something in the neighborhood of 12 or 13. I think Indiana's going to win by over 20 in this game. I think the Hoosiers are going to be really upset that they lost against Syracuse, and I feel like they're going to come out aggressive. They're going to come out angry. Nebraska, I think they're going to hit some threes in this game. I do. I think the 28% or 27% you mentioned earlier is bound to go higher just because I do see some talented players on Nebraska. I don't see a bunch of crappy three-point shooters. I see a team of good players. Maybe they're just getting a little bit unlucky. I can see Nebraska hitting some threes.
Yep.
But in the grand scheme of things, I think Indiana has too much firepower. I think the rest advantage will come through as well. Indiana's playing at Assembly Hall. Indiana's going to want to start Big Ten play 1-0. I think it really helps the Hoosiers. This game is at noon Eastern instead of 7 or 8 Eastern. A night game where Nebraska may have had an extra few hours to get ready to prepare for this game. Instead, it's a noon start. So I think Indiana's going to come out, play angry, play aggressive. I have the final in this game, 85-61. I think the Hoosiers comfortably knock off Nebraska. And if they lose, we will just have a 3-week-long moment of silence. Because if they lose to Nebraska, they sure as hell aren't going to go to Madison on Wednesday and beat the Wisconsin Badgers. So that's what Indiana has in the week to come. We will have a podcast episode on Tuesday night after the Nebraska game, before the Wisconsin game, to get you set up for that contest. So Matt, as we wind down here on this Thursday night, what final thoughts do you have? Take us home here. Indiana did drop their first game of the season to Syracuse, but overall Hoosier fans seem to be in good spirits.
Look, this team needed to lose at some point. It needed to happen. They won the 2 games in the Bahamas. They lost against Belmont in the secret scrimmage, and then they won 5 games in a row. They were on like an 8-game winning streak. It was bound to happen. Or they win 6 games already. So 5 or 6.
6-1.
They're 6-1. So they won basically 9 games in a row. Look, a 90% winning percentage we will take. And the one game they lost was in double overtime with their 2 point guards fouling out, their second highest score or third highest scorer fouling out, best 3-point shooter. And we had a shot to win it and couldn't. Look, I'll accept it. It was on the road, first true road game, whatever. It's fine. Like, regain. Let's start another 9-game winning streak here.
That's go.
It. That's my thoughts. That's it.
Their winning percentage isn't going to come close to 90%. They're going to lose some games. And I think this is a good test of seeing how this Indiana team can bounce back.
I mean, if they want to prove us wrong and win 90% of the games, I'm not opposed.
Look, I'll tell you one thing. Clearly, when they were winning games, they weren't doing enough to fix their turnover problem. So after losing because of that, you better believe now the players are going to realize, oh, shoot, like this is really important. My final thoughts are, I want to tip my cap to Hoosier Nation. Look, over the last few years, there's been a lot of general commentary that Indiana fans are really pessimistic. They get down on the program, and understand it because Indiana didn't play in the NCAA tournament in the last four plus years. Indiana fans overall, when gauging the social media interaction over at Indiana HQ, I want to tip my cap to all of you. You seem to be positive. You seem to be uplifted by the way this team has played so far this year. After the game on Tuesday night, we released a Twitter poll that said, hey, just what are your thoughts on IU basketball after the loss to Syracuse? And 82% still say you loved them or you liked them. And I think that's really good. Those numbers were higher than I expected when I posted that Twitter poll moments after a tough IU basketball loss. But there's clearly a lot of positivity. You know, I want to tip my cap to a follower named Sean Odier, who said, I'll love them until the day I die. How about a Twitter account called A Hopeful Hoosier, who said, I meant to hit love them, but hit like them. I regret everything. I mean, Indiana fans clearly noticed the team on Tuesday night that played confidently, that played with belief and with high spirits. And if nothing else, Hoosier fans will have your back when you play that way over the course of the year.
Yeah. Unless
you lose to Nebraska, then panic hits and sets in. So hopefully Indiana can start Big Ten play 1-0. But that about wraps it up for episode 228 of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You're all beautiful people. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening.